Welcome, everybody, to the NFL Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The NFL Show is brought to you by BetNow.eu. To get a cashback bonus on your first deposit, use the promo code TRUTH100. I am your host for the NFL Show, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I'd like to welcome in my co-host from the FF Face-Off, the best fantasy football show on the internet, Anthony Cervino. How you doing, Anthony?
What's going on, Mike?
Oh, not much, but we're going to get to talk a little Thanksgiving football. We're going to preview all three games today. We're going to talk a little bit about the greatest games since 1970 that we've seen on Thanksgiving Day. And we're going to start off with the Bears and the Lions in a matchup that I think is not that attractive at any time of day, on any day of the year, as Mitchell Trubisky will take on Jeff Driscoll. What's your take on this? The Bears are favored by 2.5 points. The game's at 12:30 tomorrow. This is, I think, the worst of the three games.
Yeah, this one's going to be, really tough to watch. They're two bad teams. The Bears have been going in the right direction. Jeff Driscoll plays better at home, and so there's a chance that this can be a competitive game with some offense. But really. It's a meaningless game on one of the biggest football days of the year.
Yeah, and there's always at least one of these games, but that's because the Detroit Lions are always in one of these games.
Yeah, and the question always comes up, should the Lions and the Cowboys do that? I mean, it's tradition.
I think
so. I don't want to break up tradition, so I think that should stay, which is why the NFL put a nightcap, which changes every year.
Yeah, and I think the first Thanksgiving Day game was like 1931 or 1934. It was the Detroit Lions, and it was after they moved from Portsmouth, Ohio to Detroit. And the story I remember reading was to try to generate a crowd. They played on Thanksgiving Day, and the first Thanksgiving Day game, they played against the Bears, and I think it was the two best records by teams that have ever played on Thanksgiving at the same time, because I think that Bears team in 1934 was 11-0, Detroit was 10-1, and they actually had to turn people away in Detroit because so many people were interested in seeing the game. And from then on, I think there's only been the years during World War II where this game wasn't played in Detroit. So I think traditionally, I think this game still needs to be played in Detroit. Dallas, I think, started theirs in 1966, wasn't it, Anthony?
I think so, right around there.
Yeah, so I'm good with it, especially the Detroit one. They could change the Dallas one because everybody gets sick of the Cowboys anyways. But when I look at this game, despite the issues that both of these teams, the Bears and the Lions, have had on offense, their defenses have done everything in their power to keep their teams competitive over the last four games. The Bears and Lions have combined to register 32 tackles for a loss, 17 sacks, 44 quarterback hits, 34 pass deflections, and 7 takeaways. The Bears have allowed only 10th fourth-quarter points during this stretch, while the Lions have only given up an average of 3.4 rushing yards per game. So I think this is probably going to be a close game. It's just going to be low scoring and maybe a little boring.
Yeah, I actually like both offenses in this game. I actually like Chicago's offense in this game because Trubisky's been trending in the right direction. He's put together his best three-game stretch of the year. Before last week, he hasn't put together back-to-back games that were quality, and now it looks like he's going in the right direction. I don't think he should be there next season, but at least for the rest of the 2019 campaign, I think Trubisky will be fine in some of these matchups. I think they can run the ball on Detroit. So I think the Bears are going to put up some points.
So what's your prediction? Give us a final score.
Final score, Chicago 24, Detroit 21. I think it's going to be that close of a game.
All right.
And that competitive.
I'll say 21-17. And I'm going to go with the Bears also. I think the Bears are just a little bit better on defense. They're a little bit better on offense. It wouldn't surprise me if it's lower scoring than this, but I'll say 2017, 21-17 Bears. Next up, I think this is by far the best game of the day because it's the only game where you have two teams that actually are fighting to make the playoffs in it. We've got the Buffalo Bills traveling to Dallas to play the Cowboys, Anthony. The Cowboys are favored by 6.5 to 7 points, which I think is way too much in a game like this. What's your key to this game?
That's absurd.
Yeah, what's your key here?
I think the key
You there?
to the game, he actually ran the ball. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I think the key to the game is going to be Ezekiel Elliott because that's how he beat this Buffalo Bills defense, is running the ball. And I think he needs 25 to 30 combined touches for Dallas to win. And I think they also need to force Josh Allen to turn the ball over. And Allen has cleaned that up in the second half of the year.
Yeah, and this is a huge game for the Bills. We're trying to keep pace with the New England Patriots in the AFC East. The Cowboys are trying to sustain their lead in the NFC East. So, huge game for both teams. And the thing that concerns me about both of these teams and why I think it's going to be a close game is both of these teams start games slow. I mean, both of them have a history of being slow out of the gate. Dallas has only averaged 3.6 points per first quarter on the season and have been beaten to the bunch. And basically, they've given up the first score of 8 of their 11 games so far.
That's what I say anytime I talk about Dallas and Jason Garrett. That's the issue. That you blink your eye and they're down 7 or 14 nothing in the first 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah, and the thing about it is neither one of these teams are really built to come back on the other team because of the way the other team plays. Buffalo isn't any better in the opening 15 minutes. They put up 3.6 points per first quarter also, but they have jumped out to an early lead in 5 of their last 7 games. The Bills do rank 5th in fifth quarter points against, allowing only 3.2 on the year, while Dallas has given up twice that at 6.3. When I look at this game, it really scares me if I'm a Cowboy fan because the Cowboys have had issues. They're better against the pass than the run, aren't they, Anthony?
Yes, they are.
And this is a possible letdown spot. You're a short week after coming out of New England. Buffalo had a much easier game last week. And Dallas has some key bodies banged up on the offensive line that could slow down the production even more in that opening stanza against the Bills' defense. That's only given up 7 first-half points per contest. And when you're missing Leighton Vander Esch and you're missing the nose tackle, I think that could cause major problems going against Buffalo.
Yeah, the key is trying to contain Devin Singletary. Sony Michel had one of his best games of the year last week. Sony was having a terrible year. I know he only put up 80-something yards, but his yards per carry is going in the right direction. And he really did get Singletary had over 100 combined yards last week. So I think you have to contain, Devin Singletary more so Frank Gore. But if you do that and you force the Bills to be one-dimensional with Josh Allen, then I think the Cowboys have a legit chance.
Yeah, and when I look at this game, I mean, it all comes on Josh Allen. I think if he doesn't turn the ball over, I think the Bills will win this game. If he turns the ball over, I think they lose the game. I think Devin Singletary and Frank Gore will have big games. And I think this is a close game that goes down to the wire, Anthony.
Yeah, I think it's going to be another 3-point game. I think a lot of these games tomorrow, or at least 2 out of the 3, are going to be close. That's why they gave them such a big winning margin in Vegas. I think it should be a little bit closer, but I would take Buffalo on the points.
Yeah, I
do think Dallas, it's a game for the Dallas Cowboys. And if you lose this one, then you're really just hoping Philly loses out somehow or, really collapses more than they already have to make the playoffs.
I think they've already collapsed, but we talked about it yesterday. The schedule for the Eagles is so soft at the end of the season.
Soft.
Even with a collapse, they're probably going to go 3-2.
And then for Dallas, after this game, you have Chicago, and I believe that's in Chicago, and the Rams. And these are all winnable games for the Cowboys, but with I guess nothing's a lock with Jason Garrett.
No, nothing's a lock. So the question is this: if Buffalo was to win this game, with an extra 3 or 4 days before your next game, is there a chance we see Jerry Jones make a change?
Yes.
How much of a chance?
Dallas loses this game. If Dallas loses this game, Jason Garrett won't make it past Black Friday.
Ooh, so he won't even be able to go shopping safely. So you picking the Cowboys by 3?
I just don't see. Yeah, I'll take the Cowboys by 3, but if they lose, Garrett's done.
Yeah, I'm going to say Buffalo 16-13. I like McDermott. I think he's a little tougher. I think this game's a complete toss-up, though. It wouldn't surprise me either way. It also wouldn't surprise me because in the past, when Jason Garrett's job's been talked about this, it seems like the Cowboys have usually responded to keep his job. So as a Cowboys fan, if you knew you could get rid of him and Chris Richards to head coach on Friday, would you rather win the game or lose the game?
I never want to see my team lose, Mike.
Yeah, but your team has no chance to win anything in the end the way it's set up right now.
Still, I want to see him win. I still want to see him in the playoffs. I'd rather them be in the playoffs than not in the playoffs, when it's all said and done.
How about this, though? I think they have a better chance to make the playoffs if they were to lose the game and change the coach.
Yeah, I thought about it that way, too. I thought about the spark that could happen with Chris Richard. Assuming that's who they even promote, knowing the Cowboys will give Marinelli another shot as a head coach. And we saw how that worked out in Detroit.
Yeah, that'll be a bad idea. Of course, in Detroit, I mean, everybody's failed since the 1950s. So maybe it was just because it was Detroit. But, yeah, my guess is they'd go – how about this? They go with Marinelli, and then Chris Richards, the guy who takes over when the season's over. But right now I think there's major issues in Dallas, and it's basically because of Jason Garrett. And I think he said it best yesterday. This is a 9-2 team talent-wise. It's 6-5. That's on the coaching. Next up, we get the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons. Of course, Atlanta messed up New Orleans, surprised everybody a couple weeks ago. But the Falcons went back to their old ways last week when they got beat by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What kind of a shot do you give the Falcons here?
I don't give them much of a shot. They won a couple of games. They dropped the game last week to Tampa Bay, and now you have a Saints team. Because that loss really set them back in the playoff picture and possibly cost them a bye. So I think Drew Brees and company is going to come out and blow this game open quick.
All right. I actually think this is going to be a closer game. I think that if the point spread's 7.5, I think I would take the Falcons if I was going to bet it. Just because, for the simple fact that it's a short week. Atlanta's at home. This is probably the last game where they really have something to play for, because the Saints and Falcons, even though a lot of people don't realize it's one of the best rivalries in the NFL, and plus it's a divisional game. And whenever you get a divisional game, you usually don't have much more than a 7-point spread, no matter who's playing the game, Anthony.
What's Marshawn Lattimore's status? Because I think he's going to play a big role in this game. Because the Saints defense, I mean, look what happened last week with Kyle Allen passing all over the place. DJ Moore going for a couple of touchdowns over 100 yards. If Matt Lattimore is out, I think the game is going to be a lot closer. But if he plays, I just don't see it.
Yeah. He was limited in practice. Hold on. Yeah, as of Monday, he was limited in practice. Let's check out the injury report here. This injury report will be from yesterday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He did practice, but limited. Julio Jones was resting, which tells me he's probably going to play. He was just resting. He practiced on a limited basis on Tuesday. If he plays against Atlanta, it will have been 18 days since he last suited up, since straining his hamstring. It doesn't really say whether he's going to practice or whether he's going to play or not. So, I mean, he was limited. He practiced a little bit. I would think almost with playing the Falcons, and a hamstring injury and 10 days off until your next game after this, I would think maybe you sit him and try to win the game without him.
Yeah, I see that too, and that's going to open things up for Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, which is going to make this a much closer game. And Devonta Freeman practiced fully, so it looks like he'll be ready to go. Who do you give us a score in this one then?
I
You there?
still choose. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up real bad from time to time.
I think they cover the spread by 2 scores. I think the Saints are going to go 30-21.
All right, I'm going to say 34-28 Saints. Also, other news with the NFC East. Philadelphia Eagles wideouts Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar are expected to return to practice on Wednesday. That's huge for the Philadelphia Eagles. Get ready to make the stretch run, Anthony.
Yeah, but I think the bigger piece is going to be Jordan Howard, if he's cleared for contact and if he's going to be able to play or not, because that team is different when he's not in that backfield.
Yeah, look how different the Bears are when he's not in the backfield. So you need all three of those guys moving forward, though. Another big injury for the Baltimore Ravens. Give me the effect on this Ravens offense, losing Matt Skura, who's the starting center for the rest of the season. You there, Anthony?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Says we got a poor connection right now.
Yeah.
You there? Hey, Anthony? Anthony. All right, we're going to call Anthony back, see if we can get a better connection there. I want to apologize to the people that are listening. But, yeah, the Ravens will be missing their center, Matt Skura, for the rest of the 2019 regular season with a knee injury suffered in Baltimore's 45-6 win over the Los Angeles Rams. And that's going to be a killer. All right, guys, right now we are going to take a quick commercial break. We'll see if we get Anthony back up, and then we're going to talk a little Thanksgiving history, the best games we've seen since 1970. So we will be back right after this.
Motorist Insurance Group and Brick Street Insurance have come together to create a better one-stop shop for agents and policyholders, encircling you with coverage at every step in life's journey. We are now Encova Insurance.
Replenishing Care and Technologies is a legal competitive advantage for elite athletes to promote their lifelong health. Replenishing Care and Technologies achieves this by stacking a set of specifically chosen regenerative medicine technologies into one personal best performance and personal best fitness system. Each technology either gives your cells back the resources needed to perform, heal, and repair at its best, or helps your body stay in homeostasis so you can train harder, recover faster, and improve performance. Learn more by clicking on the RC&T banner at the top of our website, thegruelingtruth.com.
Prepare your vehicle for the weather ahead during Superstart Battery Month at O'Reilly Auto Parts with great deals on batteries and accessories.
Yeah, hold on,
Plus,
we're in
save on your
commercial.
next oil change with 5 quarts of Valvoline Max Life motor oil and a MicroGuard filter, just $28.99.
All right, guys, we're back on the Grueling Truth Sports Network on the NFL Show. All right, Anthony, I don't know what we were talking about, but we're going to talk.
We're talking about the Ravens' offensive line,
Matt
their
Skura.
center injury. I think that's going to be a significant loss because, he's been Lamar Jackson's center all season long. He makes the calls. He makes the calls for the offensive line. So I think that's going to be a pretty big injury for them to overcome.
Yeah, because I don't think people realize how important a center is to an offense.
He's essentially the line's quarterback.
Yes, and he's making the line calls. He helps out Lamar Jackson. So I think it'd be a big injury. We didn't see a big effect against the Rams because the game was over before it started. All right, let's talk a little NFL Thanksgiving memories. We talked about the first NFL Thanksgiving game in 1934 with Detroit against Chicago. As a Cowboys fan, I'm sure you got a lot of great memories. And the great thing is, I wrote an article on the 10 greatest Thanksgiving games since 1970, and the Cowboys were in half of them. And the best part was they only won 1 out of the 5.
Yeah, even for me, I think I brought this up yesterday. One of the most memorable games, is a game that Dallas lost to the Minnesota Vikings, and that was in Randy Moss's rookie year.
Yeah, was that 1998?
I believe so. 97 or 98. I think Moss had 3 catches over 120-something yards, if not more. And weren't they all touchdowns or 2 of them touchdowns? I mean, he just lit up Dallas. And he was pissed off because Dallas, he wanted to be a Cowboy. A lot of teams passed on Randy Moss. And the Cowboys at the time, they made the decision not to go with the guy with an off-the-field problem.
Well, see, my favorite Vikings-Cowboy game was 1987. And that was the strike year when the Vikings ended up in the NFC Championship game, lost 10-7 to the Washington Redskins. But that was a game where the Cowboys sent the game into overtime on a touchdown pass at the end of the fourth quarter from Danny White. That would have been at the end of Danny's career. The Vikings ended up winning early in overtime on a Darren Nelson 24-yard run. I don't even really remember the Randy Moss game. Wasn't that a blowout?
Yes.
Good. All right. The one that stands out to me, though, if you're a Cowboys fan, you have to remember this, was the 8-2 Cowboys the 7-3 Cowboys hosting the 8-2 Dolphins in 1993, which I think is the only snow game I ever remember seeing in Dallas. And Dallas blew a 14-7 halftime lead, and then Pete Stoyanovich hits 3 short field goals to win the game. But the one that won the game is one that got blocked and ends up rolling down towards the end zone. The thing I remember that is you watch Jerry Jones on the sideline celebrate and pumping his fist because they've won the game, and then you see the absolute look of horror on his face when he realizes the Miami Dolphins had the ball in the end zone.
Yeah, and wasn't that the year they beat? That was one of their Super Bowl years in the 90s, the early 90s.
That was the second Super Bowl year. And the interesting thing about the Dolphins, they won that game in Dallas to go 9-2. I don't think they won another game that season.
Who, Miami?
Yeah.
And they shouldn't have won that one, but again, this is Leon Lett, one of many blunders in his career.
Oh, that was the only blunder that really cost him anything, wasn't it?
Right, but still, I mean, he's made some dumb mistakes. The Super Bowl holding the ball out, and Don Beebe, was it? Yeah, it was Don Beebe ran up and stripped him when he was watching himself on the Jumbotron.
Yeah. But, yeah, the rest of that season, the Miami Dolphins didn't win another game. Because after that, they lost to the Giants by 5. They lost to the Steelers by a point. They lost to Buffalo 47-34. Lost to San Diego 45-20. Lost to the Patriots 33-27. They won that game and then didn't even make the playoffs. And they were sitting at 9-2 after that game.
Did you, in your article, mention the 2005 Broncos beating Dallas in overtime? I think Champ Bailey had at least 1 or 2 interceptions in that game, one of which went for a touchdown. I can remember that one like it was yesterday.
Actually, no. But I've got the 2001 Broncos-Cowboys, where the Broncos dominated the first 3 quarters of the game and had like a 23-3 lead. And the Cowboys scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, ended up coming up short 26-24. And I think John Bon Jovi performed at halftime of that game.
Oh.
Who's performing at halftime of the Cowboys game tomorrow?
I don't know. I usually don't pay attention to the festivities.
It's usually people I've never even heard of. Or people I don't want to hear of. But I don't know. Any other Cowboy games that stand out to you?
I mean, we talked about the Jason Garrett game, 93 or 94,
94
when they blew out the Packers.
Yeah, I was good with that because I never liked Brett Favre. My favorite Cowboy Thanksgiving memory was the 1979 game against Houston because those were 2 great football teams. I think the Cowboys the year before had lost in the Super Bowl to the Steelers. The Oilers had lost 34-5 in the AFC Championship game to the Steelers, and in '79, the Oilers would go back, lose 27-13 in the AFC Championship game. That Cowboys team in '79, though, I think that was Roger Staubach's last Thanksgiving Day game, and the Cowboys ended up losing in a huge upset to the Los Angeles Rams, who were just 9-7 that season, and Rams went on to almost beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl. But you had two of the greatest running backs of all time, Earl Campbell and Tony Dorsett. You had two of the most innovative coaches of all time in Tom Landry and Bum Phillips. Campbell rushed for almost 200 yards, and the Oilers basically win the Texas State Championship 30-24 over Dallas. But I still think that was the number one Thanksgiving Day game I've ever seen, just because of the level of play in that game. I mean, you had Roger Staubach, Dan Pastorini, Earl Campbell, Tony Dorsett. You had Robert Brazil, who recently went into the Hall of Fame. Too Tall Jones, Hollywood Henderson, Randy White. I mean, to me, that was the greatest Thanksgiving Day game I've ever seen.
Was that what year was this again?
1979.
79. Yeah, I wasn't born yet.
Yeah, I know. Rub it in. My number two game was a game that was nondescript because in 1986 the Packers and Lions played. Neither team was very good, but it was an absolutely great game between two bad teams, and the Packers scored like 14 points late in the game to put it away, but the Packers beat the Lions 44-40 there. I don't know if you remember, since you're obviously a lot younger than me, Lynn Dickey was the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. He had John Jefferson. Who else was on that team? He had Jefferson and somebody, James Lofton. I don't know if he had Jefferson
James
or not.
Lofton.
James Lofton was a Green Bay Packer in 1986. This is before he went to the Bills. But
Yeah.
absolutely great game. This was Forrest Gregg's last season before he would get fired and Lenny Infante would take over with the Packers. And it was a 44-40 final. And I'll tell you another one as a semi-Lions fan, because I've always liked them, and I loved Billy Sims, because I'm one of the few people that I think Billy Sims was better than Barry Sanders. But Billy Sims in 1983 went off on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think they beat the Steelers like 45-3. That's one that was not a great game, but I just remember it because I really hated the Pittsburgh Steelers. So what's your best Lions memory?
Best Lions memory. I don't know if it's in in winning, but I remember right around 97 or 98, Lions beat the Steelers by a handful of points in overtime.
Was that the coin toss game?
Yes.
Okay, I forget what year that was, but
98.
My best
98.
Lions one was 1980. Which I think you can find this game on YouTube. But the Bears scored 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns to force a overtime with the Lions. It was the first overtime game in Thanksgiving history, and the overtime lasted 13 seconds as Bears returner Dave Williams ran the opening kickoff of the overtime, 94 yards for a touchdown. You throw in watching Walter Payton rush for 123 yards, and you have a great game there also. And when I talked about Billy Sims and then Walter Payton. Probably my best Barry Sanders memory was 1995. And the only good thing about watching the Lions in 1995 was getting to watch Barry Sanders run the ball. And he ran for 138 yards. Scott Mitchell and Warren Moon combined for like 800 yards passing and 7 touchdowns. And the Lions ended up beating the Vikings 44-38. But that would be my memory there.
No, wasn't there a tragic Thanksgiving Day game involving the Lions where there was a player paralyzed? Was it Dennis Byrd?
Are you thinking Mike Utley?
Maybe. I just remember a Thanksgiving Day game where a player, I believe, ended up
It could have
paralyzed.
been Byrd. Byrd played for the Jets, but Mike Utley was a Detroit Lion that got paralyzed also. But I don't remember if either one of those were on Thanksgiving or not. I don't think they were. I know that the Dennis Bird one wasn't, because I think that was like at the end of the 97 or 98 season.
Yeah, it was Utley.
It was Utley? Was it on Thanksgiving?
I think so.
Well, damn it. You got Google. Find out.
That's what I'm trying to do right now.
That's what I'm doing, too, right now. And that's what the people that are listening are doing right now, too. Let's see.
Nope, the Utley was on the Sunday game. Why do I feel like something happened on Thanksgiving?
Are you thinking of maybe Chuck Hughes?
It had to be during the 90s.
Oh, okay.
So,
because, see, the Lions have a big history of bad things happening. But they had the only player in history to die in an NFL game also.
Really?
Which was Chuck Hughes. Because I wrote an article about that, and that was like in 1970, I think. Because I wrote the article like in June of this last year, but he died on the field. He's the only player to die in an NFL football game. He was 28 years old. I'm trying to remember the exact story because I wrote the article, but he had a heart attack during a game. And it was like 1970 or 71. And he had a heart attack before the first, or he'd already had one heart attack in his life. He was only 28, and he left the hospital. Chuck Hughes left the hospital 4 days after the first heart attack, and he was running a temperature, complaining about what he thought was just acid reflux. Now, the day before the tragic day, Chuck had gone to a party with his wife, Sharon, and he recounted thinking that he looked sick and was worried, or she thought that. And that night, Chuck went to the team hotel to prepare for the day's next game, and he didn't call Sharon the night before the game, which was the first time that he hadn't done something like that. And what nobody told her was that the night before the game, he'd been sick all night, repeatedly vomiting, and the Bears and Lions played on October 25th, 1971, and it was a typical black and blue division game, and the Bears took the lead on a Bobby Douglas quarterback sneak. They were up 28-23 with time running out, and with under 2 minutes to go, the Lions began a last-ditch drive to try and win the game. Larry Walton, who had earlier caught a touchdown pass from the Lions quarterback Greg Landry, was injured, and Chuck Hughes came in to replace him. Landry was looking for Hughes downfield, and his sure-handed flanker made a diving grab to give the Lions a clutch first down on the Bears' 37-yard line. The 32-yard reception was Hughes' first of the year and only the 15th of his unremarkable fifth-year career. Landry went back to pass twice more, throwing incomplete each time. On third down, Hughes flanked out to the right. The Bears cornerback covering later said that Hughes' eyes looked kind of strange as they faced each other across the line of scrimmage. Hughes ran a down and in, but this time Landry passed instead to tight end Charlie Sanders, who's now in the Hall of Fame, who dropped the ball near the Chicago goal line. A collective moan went up in the stands. Most eyes were on Sanders when Hughes, returning to the huddle, suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed around the Bears' 20-yard line. He laid face down in the vicinity of deep left field at Old Tiger Stadium. He twitched uncontrollably on the soggy turf. Dick Butkus stood over him. Some thought Hughes was faking an injury, or that the Chicago middle linebacker had finally killed someone on the field. And the sad thing is, that picture, when it's put up, is kind of iconic, is Butkus standing over basically a Chuck Hughes who died. And there was a lot of people years later that thought that Dick Butkus actually killed him on the field.
Wow.
But Butkus saw that something was wrong. He frantically signaled to the sidelines. Traders and doctors hurried out, and a physician charged down from the stands as more than 54,000 people silently watched and held their collective breaths. Doctor beat their fist on Chuck Hughes' chest, but to no avail. The stadium clock showed 62 seconds left in the game, but that was it for Chuck Hughes. And Hughes was placed on a stretcher at Tiger Stadium, rushed by ambulance to Henry Ford Hospital. Reports indicate that he had already passed away on the field as his arm hung limp and lifeless off the side of the stretcher that was carrying him. The game resumed. Distracted players moving listlessly inside the hushed ballpark. A siren could be heard in the distance. Moments later, the game was over, and once excited fans filed out, talking in low, hushed tones. Hughes was officially pronounced dead at 5:34, and an autopsy revealed that he had died of acute coronary thrombosis, brought on by premature hardening of the arteries. So basically, nature, God, had given Hughes the heart of a 60-year-old man. But
wow.
The thing that's really messed up is everybody knew that he just died on the field, and they still finished the game.
Do you think that they would still do that now?
Yeah.
And finish the game?
Yeah. I would hope they wouldn't. But, I mean, how many times have we seen a football player paralyzed on the field?
Yeah, that's
continues?
true.
You know, I mean, it's sick. But I guess the game must go on no matter what.
Is it? Yeah.
I'm not saying it's right because I think it's wrong. I mean, I don't know how you could watch somebody get paralyzed and continue to play. I mean, the whole circumstance is messed up.
I feel like especially now, I don't want to say players were insensitive. I feel like with the players are a little bit more sensitive now when we see players, you know, exchanging jerseys and helping each other up. I feel like 15 years ago, we didn't see this. So especially now, if a player died or even, you know, like the Mason Rudolph hit, you know, it looks hard for these guys to get back out there.
But it is. And I guarantee it was hard back then because I would make this claim. I would think that the players were tighter back then than they are now.
Well, because of free agency.
Well, you didn't have multi-millionaire guys, you know, that are on that field. You know, most of these guys, probably 90% of them back then, had jobs off of the field.
Right.
And I think it was just from talking to the guys like Eddie Metter, who was all-decade defensive back in the 1960s, and Roman Gabriel. They all talk about how much more tight-knit it was back then. But then again, back then you're not making as much money. They tell you to play, you play. But I still think, unfortunately, in the world we live in, the game would still go on today. I mean, hopefully it wouldn't. And hopefully we'll never have that situation again. But, I mean, it's probably inevitable that it'll happen again. Whether it's something freak like this, where it's just a heart attack, or if it's something that's caused by a hit. I mean, could you imagine if somebody got hit and died on the field? I mean, in the world we live in now, would that be the end of professional football?
Unfortunately, I don't think you can kill the NFL or football.
You don't. This is the thing, though.
People know what they're getting themselves into with CTE, and you can try to make it as safe as possible, but you know, parents understand the risk when putting their kids into football.
They don't. They really don't.
No, I mean, I feel like I do, and I'm going to still let my kid play.
Yeah, because you
don't have
understand.
Kids that play.
Yeah, and I do understand, and I still let them play, and it's stupid. I mean, it's stupid. You know the risk, but you're still going to do it. So that tells me that people don't really understand the risk. They just think that that's something that happens to somebody else. Because really, when your son, you know, I watched my son in a national championship game last year go down holding his head. I mean, he had to come off the field, and he's fighting to get back on the field, and the rest of the game, we got to hold him out. But I know what just happened. His brain just smacked off his head, came back, and, you know, he just lost a part of his brain he's never getting back. It's stupid. But you always think it can't happen to you. And the thing that's a bitch is my sons, both of them have played since the age of 5 or 6. And They've probably both played hundreds of football games, and that's the only time one of them's ever gotten hurt. At least hurt brain-wise that we know of. But
Right.
still, when you're getting hit, your brain's still moving around. It's still smacking off. And I think that if there was a study done on high school and college players and the effect it has on them, I think it would change the way a lot of people think. Because right now, people think that it only happens to guys that make it to the NFL. But
no, it starts at a young age. It starts at when you put pads on in Pee Wee, in my opinion, anyway.
The thing is this: I don't think Pee Wee football should be allowed. I don't think you should be able to play football until you're in high school. Because the thing that strikes me the most is the players that I've interviewed that have issues big time were usually guys that started when they were 5, 6, 7 years old because the brain's nowhere near developed yet. And it's being smacked around. And it's something that I probably was not cognizant of until my kids were probably 5th, 6th, 7th grade because nobody talked about it. And even if you know deep down what's going on, you just kind of block it out. So I don't think people really do understand, because I think if people understood exactly what happens because of the game, nobody'd let their kid play. And I think that we've seen a decline in participation over the last 10 years big time. We've seen multiple NFL players. Who was the Borland or whatever, the linebacker from the 49ers who was all rookie? And then he stopped
and retired.
Playing?
We've seen quite a few retire, I feel like, within 5 years. There was another standout player, too, not just the 49ers linebacker. I feel like, wasn't there another linebacker who retired?
Yeah, there's
Pro Bowler.
There's been a few of them. And when you look at it in the NFL, I think if a guy gets a concussion, he had to be out for a mandatory 4 weeks. Because I don't see how you can get a concussion and be cleared within a week or two.
Well, I think we're seeing that more and more now. I mean, back, how many years ago a player would get a concussion and go back into the game. Now there's at least more of a strict protocol. And
but I don't think
Sterling
that's strict
Shepard
protocol.
missed half a season.
But I think that's only in extreme cases. Because the one I talked about with my son, he's still, and that game was played about this time in November of last year, and he was not cleared until March of this last year. I mean, it took 4 months. He was still feeling the effects of that.
And how old was he, your son, when he had the concussion?
18.
Wow.
Because, I mean, we were told by the doctor we used that, sometimes people have, issues with that even 2 or 3 years later where you're still getting headaches. And the scary thing is, my son was cleared. He played in the Under Armour Naps High School All-American game last year. He played in that in January. And he was cleared by a doctor in the middle of December to play because basically he lied about the symptoms because he wanted to play in the All-American game. And luckily in that game, he played safety. He was normally a quarterback, but he played safety in that game, and he stayed out of the way. And my son is not one to stay out of the way in a football game. And then 3 or 4 days after that game, he comes into me, and he's like, my head is killing me, and it's never stopped since the end of that game in November. I mean, that's scary shit.
Yeah, it is.
Because if you have your wits about you, you got a headache and what it's from, but you really want to play really bad. At 18, you don't think anything bad can happen to you. And I think the problem is in the NFL, most of these guys feel like they're superhuman and nothing bad can happen to them. A player dying on the field happened to Chuck Hughes. It's not going to happen to me. And I think that's the real issue because yourself, Anthony, you're under the age of 25 and you're athletically healthy. You think you're invincible.
No, yeah, you're 100% right.
Yeah, so that's my concern. And with parents, most of these parents with their kids playing football failed miserably at playing football themselves, and are trying to live their lives through their kids. I mean, I see that every day because I privately coach quarterbacks. I've got like 15 right now that I coach, but I got probably 70 every year I turn down because the mom and dad are convinced that little Johnny is going to be the next John Elway. The only problem is little Johnny can only throw the ball about 6 yards, and he's half retarded. So, I mean, but they're convinced that, he could be an NFL quarterback when he really can't. And most people can't. I mean, there's how many people in this country?
Look at the odds. Look at the odds.
Yeah, the odds to even play college football on a scholarship are minute. I think it's like 3% of all high school players. And when you get to the NFL, you're less than 1%. So if you're a quarterback, if you count practice squad quarterbacks, there's like 100 guys playing that are in the NFL under a contract. That's out of
at the quarterback
many?
Position.
Yeah, just at the quarterback position. So chances are your son, no matter how good he is not going to play quarterback in the NFL. He's not going to pitch in the World Series. He's not going to play in the NBA Finals. But parents are so delusional that they think, well, my kid will be different because he's special. And he's just, in most cases, not. And, I mean, I've coached guys at arena football that I knew were good enough to play in the NFL, but they never got a chance. Because the other thing is, it's not always just about being good enough. A lot of times it's about who you know also. And the circumstance you're in. You look at Drew Brees, because with all the quarterbacks I got, or all the players I've got, everybody's always freaking out. I want my son to play college football. Nobody's after him yet. Well, you just got to stay. You got to find one guy that believes your son can do that. Because Drew Brees had exactly one scholarship offer his entire high school career. But it was to Purdue. It was a team that believed he could do it, so it worked out. I mean, huh?
He was a walk-on.
No, he got a scholarship. He did.
Oh, I thought he was a walk-on.
Drew Brees got a scholarship offer from Joe Tiller. The offer came like February after his senior year, and he thought he was going to have to walk on. And the Purdue coach saw him and thought he could play. Now, if the Purdue coach doesn't see that film, Drew Brees might be working at Walmart as a freaking greeter right now.
Oh, can you imagine that?
Yeah, Kurt Warner. I mean, if Kurt Warner doesn't take a chance to play arena football while he's bagging groceries, and he'd have just given up on his dream, that's a Hall of Fame quarterback that would have never even played in the NFL.
Well, I think that's the part of it too. Aside from the physical skill, I think you also have you need to have the will and the mental toughness.
And you got to have luck, because I'll still say this: if Lamar Jackson's drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals, everybody would say he's a complete and utter bust right now. If Andy Dalton goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers at the start of his career,
so,
he's won Super Bowl.
Yeah. So?
Yes. Lamar
because
Jackson could not play.
I feel like if you say that, then if you put Ryan Leaf in a different situation, Ryan Leaf's a bust no matter where he goes.
Ryan Leaf is a bust no matter where he goes. Yes. But that was in his head. His head was the problem. Lamar Jackson's head is not the problem. It's the head of NFL head coaches who have a tendency to draft a guy and try to fit them to what they want that guy to be.
Yeah, but eventually with a guy like Lamar Jackson, I feel like instinct takes over and he starts making plays doing Lamar Jackson
things.
Dude,
how about this? I'll give you the perfect example. Vince Young.
Do you think John Harbaugh knew what he had in Lamar Jackson when he put him in?
I guarantee you he knew what he had, because that's why he started transitioning that offense. That's why he drafted a running back last year, because he knew he was going to go to a running team. John Harbaugh is one of the few guys that gets it. I'll give you this. Vince Young was absolutely ruined by Jeff Fisher. Vince Young went to the NFL with the Titans. He was the Rookie of the Year, was 10-6, took him to the playoffs. And then Jeff Fisher tried to fit his offense with Vince Young instead of trying to take Vince Young and put people around him. Vince Young was an absolute stud. How about this? Randall Cunningham with the Philadelphia Eagles. If you don't have Buddy Ryan, a defensive coach there that didn't care about the offense, what do you think Randall Cunningham becomes if he is drafted by the 49ers in the mid-'80s?
I mean, you're right.
I mean, it's just, you could be the most talented guy in the world, but in a situation where you have a rigid coach who wants to make you something else. I mean, with the Bengals, the perfect example was Jeff Blake. I mean, you remember Jeff Blake had the huge game, came out of nowhere against the Cowboys in 97? Was it 97?
It was somewhere right around in that mid-90 range.
Yeah, 95 to 97. But he comes out and he does that. And the rest of the year, they throw all these deep balls to Darnay Scott and Carl Pickens, and he plays his ass off.
Those names. I remember those wide receivers.
Yeah, and then they come back, though, the next year. And Kenny Anderson's the quarterback's coach, and the head coach was Bruce Coslett, and they decided they were going to make Jeff Blake Kenny Anderson. Jeff Blake's not Kenny Anderson, just like if you would have tried to make Kenny Anderson a deep ball thrower like Jeff Blake, Kenny Anderson wouldn't be talked about for the Hall of Fame. I think there is no quarterback in history where you could say he was so good that there's not a place you could have put him where he couldn't have failed. Whether it's Peyton Manning, John Elway, all these guys are guys that if you put them in a bad enough situation, they're going to fail. I mean, Kyler Murray, I don't like Cliff Kingsbury, but I think that what you have there is Kingsbury, his offense matches Kyler Murray's strengths. Now, if they fire Kingsbury and they bring in Norv Turner as the offensive coordinator or the head coach, which they're not, I'm just using an example, Kyler Murray is going to look like shit in that offense. So that's the way I take this. I think a lot of it is luck. And there's guys like Russell Wilson and John Elway. That 90% of all situations, they're going to be a success. Lamar Jackson is a guy in probably 50% of situations can be a success. But with a smart head coach, he's a Hall of Famer. And the hope is, if Harbaugh ever leaves 5 or 6 years from now, by then Jackson's so established, anybody that comes in is going to do what he wants to do anyways. But I really think Lamar Jackson would have been completely screwed if he'd have been a Cincinnati Bengal or a Miami Dolphin or any of those places.
What about New England?
New England, they would have done what they needed to do to go. He's Bill Belichick to me is John Harbaugh. He's going to adjust. I mean, the perfect example of that is what Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells did on defense up until 1981. 1981, they completely changed their defense to design it around Lawrence Taylor. Because the only linebacker in NFL history that was used the way Lawrence Taylor was in 1981 was Robert Brazile. And Robert Brazile was coached by Bum Phillips, who was absolutely one of the most brilliant defensive coaches in the history of the NFL. And Robert Brazile, if you go watch, there's a YouTube video, Tums Neutralizer, with Robert Brazile. If you watch that film and you don't know who it is, and then you go watch the same highlight films of Lawrence Taylor, they look like the same guy. The defense was designed the same way. And Lawrence Taylor, Robert Brazile would have been great linebackers anyway. But when you play them the way that Bum Phillips and Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells played those guys, they went from being better than most to two of the greatest outside linebackers that ever lived. Lawrence Taylor is probably by far the greatest outside linebacker that ever lived. But if you put him on a regular defense, he's still going to be a Hall of Famer, but he's not going to go down as the greatest defensive player that ever lived. Because there weren't too many outside linebackers at that time where you'd have them come up, put their hand in the dirt, and go get the quarterback.
Right.
But all right. Anything else before we go, Anthony?
No. On my show, we will be going live today, right around 3:00, to talk some Thanksgiving Day games.
Yes, and you can find Anthony's show from yesterday on thegruelingtruth.com right now. It should be on the front page, but the second or third show down. Make sure you check him out on the FF Faceoff and at The Real NFL Guru. Correct, Anthony?
Yes.
All right, guys. We will be back on Friday to review Thursday's Thanksgiving Day games and to preview all the upcoming Sunday and Monday games in the NFL. Make sure you check us out at noon Friday. But for now, I'm Mike Goodpaster. He's Anthony Cervino, and you've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.